data type. According to the definition, the data type tells that a variable can hold which type of data. One more time. Data type tells that a variable can hold which type of data. For this example, let us assume that you have a variable A. So can we store 10 in A? Obviously, we can store 10 in a variable A. Can we store 12.5 in A? If A is a normal variable, we can store 12.5 in there also. Can we store A equal to in single quotes, as you know, string character literal S? Yes, it is also a possibility. Can we store A equal to true? Yes, it is. So what A will contain? A cannot contain all those four types of things or four types of values at a time. If you know the literals, so the first one is integer literal, this is your floating point literal, this is your character literal, and this one is your boolean literal. So we cannot store them at a time. That single variable can hold different data types or different types of values. So the thing or the type, the data type, whichever written before the variable, like before A I am writing int. So this int is defining that the variable A will have integer type of value. If I am writing here double or float, so it will define that the variable A will hold only decimal type of value or floating type. If I am writing here char, then the char data type defines that the variable A can contain any character, whereas boolean. Now the A is a boolean data type, so it can contain true or false. So these data types define that a variable can hold which type of data. Now the types of data type. The types of data type. There are two types. One is called primitive or predefined, and the other is called user defined or non-primitive. Predefined or primitive. These data types which are already defined in Java. That is why it is called primitive or predefined. Pre means first, पहले से, defined means definition. तो जिसकी definition Java में पहले से दी हुई है, वो क्या कहलाए? Predefined data types. And those which will be defined by the user or the programmer will be called user defined data type. So the predefined data types can be categorized into four categories. These are not the data types. These are the categories of primitive data types. They are integer, floating point, character, and boolean. We have categorized these data types onto the basis of the literal, that is integer literal, floating point literal, character literal, and boolean literal. So on the basis of them, we have categorized the data types as well. So in the integer data type, there are four data types. They are, in the integer category, there are four data types. They are byte, short, int, or long. As you can see here, byte, short, int, or long. So for storing any integer literal, we can use any of these four. Okay, any one of these four you can use while storing any integer literal, either byte, short, int, or long. In general, what we'll use is only int. We'll use only int rather than byte, short, or long. Okay, and why, that we'll discuss in the same module, but after some time. Now, for storing decimal values, that is floating point values, or the decimal values, will use two data types, that is float or double. So either of these two, either float or double, you can use the floating point numbers. To store the floating point numbers, we'll use float or double. Again the same thing, like we have byte short int long and we are only using in general int. So similarly we'll have two data types for storing floating point numbers, but to store we'll use generally double data type. Okay. The next thing is the character. So for character literal we have only one data type, that is char, so there is no such choice. And for Boolean data type, Boolean literal, we have Boolean data type. Remember and make sure to see that all these data types first letter is capital. So you have to remember this, that you cannot write the first letter as capital of any data type. So the data types are byte, short, int, long. For integer, for floating point we have two, float and double. For character we have one, char, and for Boolean we also have one, that is Boolean. Now we'll go to the user defined data type. These are three: class, array and interface. So about all these three data types, that is class, array, interface, we have to study in the class 10th or 12th. Okay. So we'll not discuss at least in class 9th about class, array or interface. We'll talk about it in further class. There's one thing which is missing, that is string literal. You might say, sir, why for string literal there is no such data type? So for string literals we have string. String is a class, but it is neither in primitive data type nor in user defined data type. So that is why it is not in this category, but string can be used. So whenever we will see there is requirement of string, we'll tell you how to store and how to use string literal. Okay. Now there's one more part of this is their sizes. See, we have different things, byte short, int long. As I told you that we'll use int. Why and where we can use byte short, long? Why we should not use, we are not using float? Can we use float and which condition? So that will be answered in the next part, that is the type and the size and the range. So here there is a chart in front of you. Data type, size in byte and range. So as you can see, the data type first is byte. And what is written size? 1 byte. 1 byte size is a byte data type. And the range is written -128 to 127. Or one more thing you can write, from 0 to 255. From 0 to 255. So this is the range. So any value from 0 to 255, if you want to store that value in a variable, you can declare a variable of byte data type. Let me show you again. So suppose here I have declared a variable, I am erasing those contents and I am rewriting. So if I want to store 100, so no need to store that into int. We can store that value into a byte variable as well. Even the values of 255 can also be stored into a byte variable. But 256 cannot be stored into byte. So for that, a value which is more than 255, we need another data type, that is short. The range of short is 0 to 65,535. 65,535. In between any number, you can 0 to 65,535, any number that can be stored into short data type. And the size, that is 2 bytes. So it can consume 2 byte memory in the memory, or it consume 2 byte space in the memory. So short, let's say B again. So here you can enter 256, 25, 2250, any number up to 65,535. That can be stored into byte, short. But if it is 65,536, so that cannot be stored into short. For that, we have another data type, that is int. The range of it is too long. It is minus 2 to the power 31 to 2 to the power 31. So it is too much, and I don't think any number in general in our day-to-day program or general program will go beyond this limit. So that is why we'll use int in most of the programs, because it will solve our general requirement. So that is why the data type int will use in general. And how much space it will occupy? 4 bytes. If anything, any calculation which goes beyond the range of int, then you can use long. Similarly, float and double. So we used to take enough amount so that any calculation can be stored. So that is why we are taking double data type in all the floating point literal cases. And for character, we don't have any choice. So we'll use only one, that is char of 2 bytes, and range is 0 to 65,535. And for Boolean, the size is 1 bit, or you can say negligible, because it contains only 2 possible values, that is true or false. So this is all about data type and their ranges. The ranges are very important for examination point of view as well. So please do memorize the ranges and the sizes in bytes of different data